Hey everyone. Well, thank you for joining the our next virtual developer meetup. I appreciate you being here. My name is Jeff Bull. I'm the developer community manager for Orkes, and I think we've got a really good, really cool webinar. I apologize for running like a minute or two behind. We were having a little challenge with Zoom on the back end and bringing a panelist in. So our guest will be on in just a second, and we'll get going. In the meantime, I want to do a couple of housekeeping items. Let me just make sure. We're getting in here. Awesome. I see people joining. This is fantastic. So our guest, Michael Liendo, is our senior developer advocate here at Orkes. He will be walking you through our a really cool topic around building with full stack, as a developer, working with agentic workflows and AI and agents, which is going to be, I think, really fantastic. If you want to follow along with him, or if you want to build yourself, you can use the Orkes virtual developer playground, not virtual, sorry, the developer playground, which is our developer sandbox. I'll drop a link to that in the chat. There's a short link there. You can click on that. It's totally free. Jump in. We call it our developer playground. You can just get in there and start using that immediately. Fantastic. Michael, how are you, sir?
Oh my goodness. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay.
Fantastic.
We, we had the snafu of getting me on here. I figured out
Dude.
what it was, by the
Okay,
way.
right on. Well, I'm sorry that happened. Apologize everyone for, having a little, I was telling everybody that sometimes you just haven't got to sacrifice enough to the demo gods for that stuff to work. It just
Yep.
has to happen. Well, thanks for being here, dude. I ran a little bit of a poll just to get a sense from people. If they've been building with agents, have they tried it? No way, experimenting. Good chunk of them have been experimenting. Some folks have not a chance at all. Had one person who said definitely. So I think that's a really good starting point. Thanks to everyone for joining. Let me wrap up those housekeeping items. And if anybody, I mentioned if anybody wants to try out what Michael is going to be showing, or wants to spend more time with building agents or workflows, etc., you can build with the Orkes Developer Playground. I put a link into the chat. Just go to bit.ly/conductor dev, and that'll take you straight in. Totally free. It's a sandbox, your own namespace. You can play with that forever. It's a really good place to get started, and everything Michael's going to be showing you is going to be based off of that. So I think it's a really good setup there. And then lastly, I threw up the one poll. I'll have a couple other polls that are run throughout the event. So if you want to engage in those, that'd be fantastic. And at the end, I'll run a final one for some feedback, and we'll do some Q&A at the very end. But in the meantime, I'm going to hand this over to Michael so you can introduce yourself and get started. Michael, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And thanks for everybody for chiming in today. It's going to be a great event. Hopefully, we've all taken a moment to just appreciate Jeff's shirt. I'm digging it. I love that, by the way.
It was either this or my llama with sunglasses shirt. I thought that might be a little too busy and distract from you, so I didn't want to do that.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you for being so considerate. Great. Well, as Jeff mentioned, my name is Michael Liendo. I'm a senior developer advocate here at Orkes. I think employee number 60. So it's a number that I hold near and dear to my heart. We're gonna have a good time as that poll is getting clicked on. And all of you are providing your thoughts on what your experience levels are. I'm gonna go ahead and do my best to demystify that in this session. I've been working with agents for a while now, before we even had the term, and I've noticed that it has gotten a little bit muddy. Let's just be real. Right? So let's go ahead and kind of walk through what I envisioned for today. So it all starts with the journey. The journey was me watching The Avengers the other day. Okay, great movie. I'm talking about the old ones, the good ones, not this new stuff. And I noticed the explosions, and I noticed the cars being thrown, and I noticed, just buildings getting destroyed, and it got me thinking, the real heroes don't get enough glory. And I'm not talking about Iron Man and Spider-Man and, Thor. No, I'm talking about the real heroes. I'm talking about the insurance agents, because they're the ones that have to put up with that, right? They're the ones that have to deal with all of those claims. And that's going to take us to our journey today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and share.
There we go. Insurance for a world of superhero challenges.
Perfect,
Fantastic.
perfect. Can I go ahead and so I'm going to like redo that now that we're messing with like the demo deities for real. Let's go ahead and pop some of this stuff up here. So what do we have? We have insurance for a world of superhero challenges. Okay. So I can come down here and I can pick up some additional plans. As I was mentioning, mutation onset support. Avenger level property destruction. And these are, plans that I would want if I had to deal with the Hulk smashing through my door or, my car being thrown at an alien UFO, right? So as we come through here, I want to do a couple things. I can check out the plans and get additional information on them, or I can also get coverage. Okay. So I'm thinking about this agentic workflow. And in the MCU, this is happening all the time, right? So I want to, as an insurance company, automate this experience. So that way you don't have a human have to deal with every single support call. We can have a tailored flow. So I'm going to go ahead and start a consultation to kind of give you some insight into what we're doing here. Right off the bat, this is going to kick off a workflow, and we're going to peek under the hood in just a moment to show you what exactly is happening here. But you can see I have a chat experience. Now, I've been connected with Agent Coulson. Agent Coulson seems fantastic, and they're going to ask me probing questions based off of the insurance plans and based off of the conversation that we're having. And the whole idea here is that it needs to come up with a plan that best suits my needs. Now, I'm going to say, I think the Hulk is just top of mind right now. So, hey, we're going to do this like point in time, right? Like there's a battle going on. This is the fun part about making my demos. I can just get really crazy with them. There's a battle going on, and the Hulk is picking up cars. I want coverage. Or rather, let's keep it open-ended. Any plans for this? Right? We're going to hit enter here. And I think a lot of us are used to this experience. You call an LLM, it gives you a response. But in our case, we want to start doing something a little bit unique based off of the response that we get. Okay, so it knows about the insurance plans. We have Avenger level property protection. Specifically covers the Hulk, right? Pretty cool. Would you also like information on coverage for personal injuries and things like that? For right now, we can go down this rabbit hole, as much as we want. Believe me, I had a ton of fun doing it. But for right now, I'm going to say, actually, this is fine. And it looks like exactly what I want. Cool. I was like, awesome. If this is exactly what I want, based off of the conversation, we need to take a different course of action. We're no longer just chatting, right? We have to do other things. And in this case, probably get an invoice or some kind of bundle package for this plan that I selected. So we're going to give this a moment to kind of do its thing here. And there we go. It's a little abrupt, but it's saying, hey, this helps a lot. I just emailed you an invoice based off of today's conversation. Look it over. If everything looks good, go ahead and submit the payment. Let me do a quick time check. We're at 1:14, and I'm going to go to my inbox and see what we can get here. Let's go here. Pop this up. You see, it came in at 1:14. And let's just go full screen. So you can see we have a couple of things that are happening. One, pretty cool. I got an email right away, right? Dear value customer, it knew my email based off of my profile. Thanks for choosing us for your insurance needs. Based off of your requests, we prepared this policy specifically for you. And that's true. It's based off of the message history. So it has the plan, Avenger level property protection. And it's like, yo, you specifically requested this coverage because of the battles and things like that going on. If you want to go ahead and pay, then pay. And presumably this would kick off something like a Stripe workflow, right? So you have that in place. And there's a couple other features that we can do in this chat experience. But I'm going to take a moment, one, to field any questions that are going on, but then also so that we can look at the workflow that just took place to better understand what's happening and what Orkes can do for you. So over in this workflow execution, I'm going to refresh to make sure I get the latest one here. And we're going to step through this. We'll go through the individual pieces in just a moment. But I do want to go ahead and take a moment to look at that exact experience that just took place. Now, when it comes to agents, the one thing you'll hear over and over again is that to be for something to be agentic, for it to be an agent, it has to have agency. And as true as that sentence is, it's also very confusing because we use the word in the definition, right? Really, what we're saying is that it has to be able to do tasks on its own. Uh, we can't, as programmers, say it is going to exactly follow these sequential steps. That's not the case anymore when it comes to working with LLMs, when it comes to working with agentic environments. And the way that you repeat this process in an unpredictable way is still a familiar concept. You incorporate something like a do while loop. Now, the tricky part is that we're going to say, keep doing this forever. And based off of the contextual information that we have, in this case, our message history, then go ahead and do a couple different things. We'll look at this from a high level before diving in. But those different things, those decision paths that we're going to make, are going to be either to send a message, essentially carry on the conversation, or as we saw, email the invoice once the conversation has reached sort of the climax there. Now, in terms of guardrails, we also have the ability to escalate. And in case something blows up, we don't want to keep this lingering around, so I just have a default case of just shut things down. Now, we'll take a look at the escalate case in just a moment, but I did want to go ahead and dive into what happened during that last conversation we had. So we can dive into the iterations themselves. And let's just start with iteration 1. With that first iteration on our input here, on the very first iteration, we didn't have any message history, right? It's a brand new conversation. And because of that, our model made the decision to greet us and saying, hey, the assumption here is that there isn't anything to talk about, so I'm going to say hi, which I think makes sense. It has context about our insurance plans, as we can see inside of here, their prices, their names, their descriptions, and it's only using that to determine how this conversation should be happening, right? What kind of insurance plan information should I, as an insurance agent, be probing for? However, what's interesting is that when we get to the output, not only is it going to dictate the next step, but it's providing the reasoning for why it did that. And in this case, there's no message history or information from the customer yet. So we need to ask those questions to determine what we're going to do next. Well, let's kind of follow that, right? Well, it went to send a message. We have this switch statement down here. This is another common aspect that you'll see when it comes to creating unpredictable agentic models. You have a loop that goes on forever, and then you have some kind of switch statement that makes non-deterministic decisions. So in the case of sending a message, it chose that, right? Not me. And when we go to send a message, now we're going to call another LLM. Now this action, if it were more fleshed out and if it had decision-making on its own, it could be another agent. Essentially, we have a decision-making agent. And if we wanted to make this a little bit more robust, we could have a conversational agent. But for the purpose of this talk, we can consider this an action. This is going to be pretty much what we all use today when it comes to calling LLMs. So we're going to chat with this customer, right? It was given the input. It has the message history, that hello statement, and the user. Hey, there's a battle going on. Hulk is picking up cars, right? And based off of that, it was given some output. The output is essentially the response in addition to its reasoning for why it decided to say that. Really cool, because when it comes to auditability and understanding why our LLMs are behaving the way that they do, having a response is great, but having the reason for that response is actually invaluable because it's really hard to trace this stuff down when you're working with it in a production environment, especially with something like insurance claims. We go down, we compute some variables, we set those variables back in our state, and then we notify our front end. I'm using a WebSocket. I'm just calling this over HTTP so that Orkes can talk back to my front end. What's really cool is that when you think about a conversation, there isn't a predictable amount of time, right? I can converse with you all, and you all can converse with me, but I don't know when those messages are going to be sent. So we have to wait. And this is essentially a webhook that is given to us by Orkes and allows us to call and pick things back up. Now I'm going to reply with my message from my front end to Orkes. It's going to trigger this webhook, and I can continue on with the conversation using these variables to keep track of the message as it's happening. That's pretty much what's happening at a high level here. We can go through a couple of different iterations, but it's all going to be effectively the same. And even when we get to our third iteration, where we start to send the invoice, you can see that it still updates. I'm going to refresh this real quick. You can see that we ended up picking that email invoice because it decided to. If we look at the reasoning for this, the output, what we get is that the customer has clearly indicated that they want this protection plan and that it's going to fit their needs. So it selected that one. And if there's nothing else, it also says the next step is to email the invoice. Now, similar to before, we went ahead and called another LLM. This one was for our conversation when it comes to sending a message. And this email invoice is going to do just that. It's going to use an LLM to craft a personalized HTML email for us. And then from there, we're going to use one of the fantastic integrations that we have with Orkes, which is going to be SendGrid, to email the customer. And as you saw previously, we're just notifying the customer on the front end that, hey, we sent that email. The chat is closed. Have a nice day. Okay. So that's what we just went through. And the really nice thing about having that visual experience in our workflow is just the fact that we can understand as the workflow is taking place, point in time where each step is at and what is happening. So if I were to maybe start up a new conversation, and I can come through here, and this is just going to be a brand new workflow. I can have the same experience, and I can say, hey, I wish somebody in the audience could give me like a really cool experience because I always default to Hulk. Let's say, hey, Thor is battling in another dimension. I'm just making things up at this point. And I want to make sure I don't get time displaced. Because why not, right? That could be a thing. Okay, so we have this, and this conversation gets sent back to us. Now, what's going to happen is we get a message back, right? We have a displacement coverage package. Awesome. And it's also asking if we want to look at other situations as well, right? This is a bundle that it's trying to put together for us. However, the conversation is still happening. So I'm going to head back over to our workflow and zoom out of this just a little bit so we can look at some of the executions that are happening. You can see we have a running workflow. And if I click on this, let's just kind of pause point in time to see where this is at. So we've gone through, we sent the initial message as we saw before. We're still in this chat, this send message loop. It'll just keep going on forever. And yet when we come down here, we're waiting. We're waiting because our workflow is paused to see what the customer says. Right? Based off of that response, we're going to go back up to the loop, and we're going to do it all over again. Now, we've explored the send message situation, and we also explored the email invoice situation. But we haven't talked about this one, this escalate. What happens there? So let's do that. Let's force this to escalate based off of the conversation. So maybe it's really frustrating, and you can say something like, oh my God, please tell me this isn't some bot. I hate this experience. Right? This is like 20 conversations deep, and then now we want to just go ahead and get out of here, right? And you want to provide guardrails and escape mechanisms for your users when you start building out agentic workflows. So if we have something like this, let's just kind of see what happens, right? We are waiting. And then on the back end, if you're thinking like a customer service experience, if you receive a message like this from a customer, you're taking off your headset, right? You're immediately finding some kind of supervisor. And that's what we're mimicking with this experience. We have this typing indicator, but if you look at our workflow, we're going to come up here. And you can see that our workflow automatically refreshed to show us that we went through a third iteration. And the decision, if we look at the output from our LLM, the decision is to escalate. And it's saying the customer is expressing frustration with this experience and is not engaging with the insurance options anymore, right? Further conversation is unlikely to be productive. So we can dive into that. We can say, well, if the next step is escalate, now we have another feature of Orkes. Now we have an escape hatch. Now we have a way to make our agentic model have some guardrails by incorporating this human in the loop. Now, in the real world, there would be likely a separate dashboard experience, right? But I'm going to show you how we can mimic that within the playground that we have here. So what I'm going to do is get out of here. And we know that we have this task waiting. Our workflow is paused. If we look at our front end, everything is paused right now as we get a supervisor involved. So I can come over here and I can say on the human task, right? Get out of the workflow over to the human task. I see that there is a workflow that is assigned. I'm going to click on this. And the great thing is that that same message that was given us by our agent, our decision-making agent, has its reasoning populated here in this form. Customers expressing frustration, unlikely to be productive. In case there are many managers that could be handling this, many supervisors, I'm going to claim this so that everybody knows, hey, Michael has it. I'm looking into it. I'm going to go ahead and contact the customer, right? We're imagining that part. And once the customer is satisfied, I can click complete. And it's going to happen really fast, but as soon as I click complete, the next step is going to be triggered and the user is going to be notified, our end user. So let's do that. Let's say complete, hurry back over, and then boom, there we go. Okay, this sounds serious. I've gotten a supervisor involved and they're going to be reaching out shortly, right? An agent disconnected the call. So to kind of recap what we have here and going through our experience, we have our workflow. There we go. And the core pieces of it are to have this do while loop. And within this do while loop, I want it to go as many times as it wants to. It's a do while and the while is true. So just repeat infinitely. I can track down that definition right over here. And you can see it's a simple function as it could be, right? Just keep going. And based off of the outcome of some of these nodes and what the decision paths are, that'll help decide what happens. But the unfortunate side is that typically when you have these in production, you don't have any observability into what is happening. We change that by providing the reasoning for each step. So how did I do that? How did I get my LLM to behave in the role of a decision maker or in the role of someone that can send an email or continue a conversation? And the really cool part about that is that we have this experience over here where we can define our AI prompts. Now, I have a decision-making prompt. No different than a lot of the prompts that we generate with some of the LLMs that are out there today. We have it built in with the Orkes experience. This part is for me. It's making decisions based off of the current state. This part is for the LLM. You bump this up a little bit for us. And it's effectively saying, hey, you're an insurance decision maker based in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I had to put that part in because every time somebody mentioned Hulk, it was like, wow, this sounds like made up and really scary. So it knows that it's in the MCU. You're tasked with creating these bundles, and then we can inject variables along the way so that it has context, right? Similar to what we would do in code, we're also doing inside of here. It knows that it has to define the next logical steps. It knows that it has to give me my reasoning. And then I define what those mean down here, right? What does it mean to escalate or send a message? I tell it to only return JSON, and I give it a sample of what that JSON is. Earlier, I was talking about message history and other variables being injected. This is how you do it. Typical $ curly brace. And that shows up over here in case I want to test it before deploying this in a production environment. And then lastly, because LLMs work really well with XML, I give it some strict guidelines that it should be following. So if the conversation is not progressing in a meaningful way, or the customer is becoming irate, right? That's a good sign that we should be escalating. But all of that is contextual. Maybe they're just really excited. Okay, so we have that in place. I saw a poll just came up here. And yeah, do you know what an agentic workflow is? That's essentially what we're defining. And hopefully it's becoming a little bit more demystified as we go out through this conversation here. But there's the AI prompt. When it comes to sending an email, I'm effectively doing the same thing. You're an email creation bot. That's your job. That's what you do. Here is the current plan bundle. So the decision maker keeps track of the bundle. Here's where it's at so far. And based off of that, you do what you need to do to craft a professional looking email written in HTML. Right? Give it some acceptance criteria, and then you're good to go. And then just to round things up, I'm going to show you the one for creating that chat experience. And it's effectively the same thing. Note that I'm continuously using this OpenAI GPT-4 model. You can use whichever one you want through our integrations. But when it comes to creating that conversation, it's like, hey, you're all about the MCU. Here are the insurance plans. And based off of the conversation, you have to know that you need to greet the customer. Just like if a person were in training, right? Like you have to know you have to greet them, or you have to know that you have to probe for more work. So you do that, give it the same acceptance criteria where we have a response and then the reasoning. And I gave it sample data of, follow-up message goes here, and then the reasoning is what you put inside of here. That's it. That's what it comes. That's the whole idea, the whole premise of creating this workflow experience, right? It's how you get from this on our front end to having this defined in our back end. The nice thing is that when it comes to production ready environments, you're in control of this agent that can do whatever it wants. I know it's a little obtuse, but that's the mindset that you want to carry. I see that we have polls up. I am going to pause for questions. Jeff, if there are questions from the audience.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you brought that up. So yeah, there's the one poll up there about the agentic workflow. Lots of folks have been interacting with that. Appreciate it. The breakdown there is so far of do they know what an agentic workflow is? Up to this point has been about 18% of them, yep, about 10% no clue, and then most of everyone's just kind of sort of, which I think is a really good place considering where we're at in the demo. So perfect. The one question that we've seen through on the Q&A so far has been, how do you make sure the agent isn't rude?
Yeah, that's I think we just covered it. Super good question because you can have it sound rude, right? You can tell it you are I think the first one that I did was you are a sassy. Actually, let's maybe go off the beaten path a little bit. So I have an AI prompt and I call it sassy. Okay. So you're a sassy weather lady. This is what I'd like to do in my free time, right? That likes to talk about the weather in some country, gets passed in as a variable, as if you were a random Pokemon. So I'm just like completely experimenting at this point, right? We can test it out in this workflow environment. So I'm going to give it a model. We're still using GPT-4, and I'm going to come back to the temperature, but we'll say that the country is going to be Canada because I was just there. Great. So we can test this out and see what we get here. Give it a moment to think. It started. Oh, honey. Yeah, you better grab your Pokeballs and your parka, because in Toronto, it's gonna be. I'm assuming that's a Pokemon, and yeah, it's a little bit frosty, right? Don't be a silly side duck. Forget your mittens. I mean, this could be construed as rude, right? Don't be a silly side duck. And it just kind of keeps on going, right? Meanwhile, in Vancouver has Squirtle in here, hydro pump, so it's a rainy day. And you need to go ahead and have these umbrellas in place or get out of the way from these Geodude sized hailstorms. Uh, so how do you make sure, or how do you control that thought process, or rather the emotion of this LLM? You tell it how it should behave, right? I can swap out sassy for rude. I can swap this out for professional. In my case, it's really good to let them know what occupation that they're in, because typically that'll assume some sort of personality. You wouldn't have sort of a clown personality in a high tier corporate enterprise environment. Uh, Maybe you would, but you have the control inside of your template of how you should behave. It's a system level message that you're passing not to the conversation that might be taking place, but rather to the LLM directly. And then, as mentioned, I was going to come back to this temperature field. The temperature dictates how eccentric you want your model to be. So, oftentimes, you want to play around with this, because if you want someone to be very creative and use expressive words, you want to modify the temperature to adjust for that. It's on a scale from 0 to 1, I believe. Does it go to 1? 0 to 2. 0 to 2. I think the really good um, use cases that I've seen for this are when it comes to like poetry, right? You want something expressive. Is it just a clear day outside, or is it a beautifully vibrant day looking over the sunset? You can get really fun results when you start messing with that. Yeah, great question. I don't have my chat up. Are there any other questions at the moment, Jeff?
Sorry, didn't get the buttons quick enough. No other questions
No.
in the Q&A at the moment, but if anyone does have a question, just drop it in the Q&A and we'll absolutely get to it here shortly.
Jeff, do you have a favorite superhero?
Favorite superhero? Oh
Yeah,
my
from the
gosh.
MCU. From the MCU.
Oh, from the MCU. Oh my gosh, that's hard to say. Wolverine. Well, he's not. Well, he actually is in the MCU now. He is in the MCU now officially. So yeah,
Yes.
Wolverine.
Okay, okay. So I think another situation, I'm gonna try and break this. I know I have a couple edge cases, right? So let's say, hey, as that intro message is coming in, right? So now we know what's happening behind the scenes. Um, Now we know that it's kicking off a workflow, and that in addition to that, we're waiting for that initial message to come through. We can say, hey, Wolverine um, is fighting with, I think it was fighting with Deadpool. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Again, don't want to get hurt. Right? So it's not my car, it's like me personally, my body. As this is coming in, can you go into adding RAG and specific functions into this flow? Yeah, absolutely. Once we get through this, I'll circle back to that one. It's like, okay, so like personal injury or like property damage. I'm going to say both. So we have this plan builder. Reason why I'm showcasing this flow. We have this plan builder, our decision making agent, and it looks at the conversation every single time, and it says, what are the best plans that would fit this? So as of right now, we have the Avenger level property protection plan, and this mutation onset plan. So I'm going to say I'll take all of those. All of those. Tanks. And what would presumably happen, right? It might ask me for additional information. It might say, hey, quick confirmation, because this is going to cost you a lot of money, and carry the conversation on. Or it could say, I have enough information on the back end. It could say, I have enough information. I'm going to generate that email invoice to you. I don't know. But what I was trying to trigger is the idea that it might time out, right? Okay, so it sent it off to me, and I should be getting an email here shortly. I'll pop it up on the screen as soon as it comes in. Uh, this is the old one, and this is the new one. Okay. So we have this, and we have multiple plans here, right? It's like if I want full protection over Deadpool and Wolverine fighting, This is what it generated for me based off of our conversation, right? And it gives me the reasoning for each and every one. And again, it has the context of our conversation. Really cool. If this were to time out, my workflow would stop. And we want to prevent that from providing a negative experience to our customers. So if I were to come down here over into the workflow, we can see that we went through 4 iterations of this and we ended up sending the email invoice successfully. The tricky part is this one, this task right here, right? When we go to create this email, what happens when I think OpenAPI has a 20-second timeout, right? How do you prevent that? How do you have durable executions inside of your workflows? Well, I cheated. I'm just going to be very upfront. I cheated. And in my workflow, I didn't want to have it time out. So I took the poor man's approach and I said on this prompt, you're an email creation bot that works fast. And you know what? That works a lot of the time. It doesn't work every time, but that was good enough so that it was like, okay, I need to generate this in a reasonable amount of time. However, when you work in a workflow environment, you can take it a step further. You could be a little bit more architecturally solid by saying, if this were to timeout, automatically retry, right? Keep doing it again. Or even better, um, try this immediately and then have a task that waits for a certain amount of time. And then you'll take effectively whichever one comes back first. It's another strategy that is often used. Okay, so I'm going to look at that comment. I just need to pull it up 1 second here. Okay, so Nick asked, can you go into reg and specific functions into this flow? I'm gonna start general, and then if you can just give me a little bit more context and what you're looking for, Nick, I can dive in even deeper. But let's start high level, right? RAG, retrieval augmented generation. Uh, that was how a lot of us started, and I'm using that inside of this flow here. So if I go back to my workflow and maybe get some real estate over here. I'm using RAG in my LLM chat. RAG is no more than sending a whole bunch of context history inside of your LLM. So that way it has more data than just what's generally available, right? You're feeding it some additional information here. In the context of our workflow, we can go to the, whoops, I need to go to the actual workflow that executed. And over here in our output, uh, where's the decision maker? Yeah, in my decision maker. You gather the entire message history here, right? We have our system, how it started, the user, and we're using that as further context for our downstream LLM, right? It doesn't want to ask a question about a plan that we've already dealt with, right? That Wolverine Deadpool scenario. It doesn't want to have to re-ask that to see if we have additional information. We gave it the additional information. Looking at your reply, let's say you have a history of this user. Great. You want to look at their previous claims and the details of those claims before offering their new plan and the rates. Yeah, that's effectively what we're doing here, except it's not the history of the user, it's the history of the conversation. But you're right. If I wanted to implement that, I would come over here in our workflow. And I'm just a little too zoomed in for my readability. So let's zoom out just a little bit and create some real estate. And let's just imagine a scenario where you need to do that, right? I'm cheating right now. I'm saying I want to set some global variables, right? But in a real world, you probably wouldn't keep this defined in your workflow. Oftentimes, you would keep this defined in a database. That way, you're not pulling it from 2 different places. So I'm over here, and I have all of the information regarding my insurance plan information. Additionally, I have the plan bundle. This variable makes sense, right? This is something that is going to be updated and is specific to the context of this workflow, this conversation. And of course, I have the message history. But to your point, Nick, you wanted to also have something like a user profile, I could add it here, right? There's nothing wrong with that. I can cheat and just say user profile, and it's going to be an array. And what would it be? Actually, probably be like an object, right? You have the name, um, and then you have the email, etc. Right? Previous claim history, things like that. Or you can come over here and you can say, you know what? I actually need to grab that from my database. So here's an HTTP call. And then based off of the results from that, I'm going to assign it to this variable, right? So you have these two working together. Now you can feed that to your agent, and your agent has that understanding. Yeah, super, super powerful. Um, and I think Maria has an example here, or Maria's chiming in the audience. I'm just gonna read that. So Maria says, "Oh, so you like have a database poll for information based off of the user." Um, oh yeah, exactly. Yep, exactly what I showed. Yeah, awesome, Maria. And Nick is saying, "Great, that's what he was seeing here. And that's what he was wanting." Yeah, the really cool things about Orcus is that we will give you a generic endpoint for you to use, right? You can define it over here and say, here's a get, or whatever method you want, and then you can pass in the parameters from there. I just needed WebSockets to be able to communicate with my front end and back end. So in my HTTP call, I'm using a self-created URL here. Whoops. And then I'm still passing in those variables. What's important to know here is that even though I'm showing you all of this from a user interface perspective, it's actually code at the end of the day, code that we control. We just define it as JSON. So if I look over here inside of my sort of entire workflow, I can see that I have all this code that was generated for me. All this UI is doing is making it easier so that I don't have to handwrite these variables and handwrite these tasks. But the really cool thing about templates, and for all of you in the audience wanted to check this out later, so you can grab this exact JSON snippet, super verbose, right? A couple hundred lines of JSON here, paste that into here, and then now you have the exact same workflow that I have. Really cool. The only difference is that you'd have to define your own AI prompts. That's kind of the fun part, right? Because now you can have those behave however you want them to. But that's the power of Orcus. That's our demo for today. And I'm happy to field any other questions regarding the code experience, the UI itself, and the workflow as a whole. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. That was fantastic. Lots of good feedback coming through. And Nick, thanks for chiming in with the questions that you had. If anyone else has any burning questions or things that are popping in your mind, definitely throw them either in the Q&A panel or just throw them in the chat. I guess a couple questions I had for you, Michael, is that when you think of like this demo as an example, to me, I see these are agentic workflows, or as you mentioned earlier, they're workflows that have some level of agency. How would you, in your words, how do you distinguish between something like what you built here and someone building an agent for themselves or what have you? Like it may seem like a superficial distinction between them, but I know that one of the questions or comments I see popping up a lot in various Reddit subreddits and Stack Overflow and other places is still a confusion between what an agent itself actually is and where the agentic workflow sort of overlap is between that and just a standalone thing they might chat with.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the way that we started when everyone was working with LLMs was with chat. Chat was the most primitive experience that you could have. I send a request, I get a response back, and it just made up these words that was just really cool, right? And over time, what we said was based off of the result from that, I wanted to do different things, that branching logic. And a lot of us stopped there. And we have those shipped in production. And that's where I think the line is drawn, is you still have a DAG, right? It's a deterministic agentic model here. So as long as I feed it a certain amount of, as long as I steer it in a certain direction, I can get a good sense of where it's going to go down, like which branch it's going to use. Where things become agentic is when you don't know how many times that is going to happen. And that seems to be what I'm picking up on the community standard is that, these are early days, But the deciding factor is, do we just have branching logic that we can pretty much steer in any direction? Or do we have no idea of how many times this is going to run? And so we're just along for the ride. And that's when you have an agent.
That makes complete sense. Two additional things popped in here real quick. I'll come back to Nick's in just a moment since a new one came in from Fernando, and I want to give him a chance to have his question, which is from an engineering team. Are any of these workflows translated to code we can store in a repository? How can we control the change management, including approvals or versions and releases?
Yeah, great question. I showed a little bit of that. Again, this code that we have right here, ideally you would develop your workflow. This is why we have the awesome developer playground here. You would develop your workflow here. And once you feel like you're in a really good spot, then you can just copy and paste this. And then we have our SDKs, which would invoke this workflow if you wanted to have it in version control and not have to run things on the back end, right? Because I could execute this straight from here. But then as to your point, how do you version control it? How do you iterate on it? You could do versioning here as well in the UI. I don't want to say you can't, but a lot of folks want that under Git. So this is how you would do it.
Fantastic. And then Nick had brought up interested in how the WebSockets worked in this specific flow. I imagine that this is a requirement for most real world applications.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple ways to do it. I am using AWS WebSockets. So it's AppSync events. So if you just kind of search for AppSync event API, this will take you to the link. I would say the two other ways that I would recommend are going to be Momento. So I think it's Go Momento. And these aren't plugs. These are just companies that I found work really well. If you go to them, they also have, they don't call it WebSockets, they call it topics. But this is a really cool serverless way. And then, of course, if you really wanted to, you can just do the standard web API WebSockets and send data back and forth that way. But to your point, it is tricky. So I use the automated solutions where they just give me an endpoint. I can publish and subscribe. That way I don't have to worry about polling. But if you didn't have a WebSocket approach, polling would be the next best thing.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And I think that's, unless anyone else, oh, actually, Maria chimed in with a question. Are you ever worried about having hallucinations with agents?
I am, especially when I'm demoing to a crowd. So it does come up, right? Let's just be real about the state of things. It does come up. Fortunately, what a lot of these LLMs have in place are guardrails. So there are guardrails at the Orkes level, and then there are guardrails at the LLM level. And I like to use a combination of both. I can make sure at the LLM level that it's not spitting out profanity, right? Or it's not providing me something really rude when I ask it to be professional, or that the words it's choosing aren't obtuse and jargon. It doesn't fit my audience, right? That can all happen at the LLM level. However, at the Orkes level, we also provide you some of those same mechanisms, but now we can say, if it did, then what are we going to do? And we can incorporate that into our workflow. I think a really common scenario is to have an LLM give you output, and based off of the result of that, call another LLM, it could be another agent, that says, I'm going to check this and rate it on a scale of 0 to 1. And if it meets anything above a 0.7, then we're going to say this is good enough, right? If you're writing a blog post and you want to automate bits of that, anything above a 0.7 means that it looks like it's fact checked. It looks like it was written by a human, and you can go on the rest of your journey that way. So I use a combination of both to minimize the impact of hallucinations.
Yeah, what you just described really resonates with me. It's one of the things I do on a regular basis, especially if I'm here at Orkes writing copy
Mm-hmm.
or a post or something. I'll initiate that with one AI as a way, and I'll give it a pretty detailed prompt, but then I'll either go back to the same AI or a different one and say, okay, either be critical, or I'll just use the simple phrase, I want you to roast this. And
Yeah.
I want you to roast this and tell me what it fails at, what it's good at, what it's missing. Is it tonal? And then I'll give it things like, is it tonally matching the audience I'm trying to match, et cetera, and have it just really kind of beat it up, but then give constructive feedback afterwards. So I think I love that approach because, to your point, whether we call them hallucinations or it's just a miss in the prompt engineering that's provided to get the response you're looking for. Sometimes there is or oftentimes there can be a mismatch there. So trying with different ones, you'll get a differently formatted response, which is really helpful. I think all the questions have been addressed. Michael, this has been fantastic. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's always a good time to get connected with you, Maria, Nick, everyone else. Thanks for taking part in the chat. Hopefully, you filled out the poll. But yeah, it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, everyone interacted with the polls in an amazing way. I really appreciate the feedback. This is really helpful, and we'll use a lot of that as feedback for next time, as well as for other future virtual meetups that we do. And then I do have a poll running right now. A couple of people have responded, which is some meetup feedback. So if you have any feedback you want to provide, simple stuff about what you thought of this particular virtual meetup, and any suggestions you have for next time, please fill that out. Let us know. We're using this to kind of build out what we want to do for all these future ones. And then also we have a weekly topic challenge going right now for the community. So if you go to community.orkes.io, we have a post there. It's all about this week's topic is all about stuck workflows. So just go there, take a look at it. There's some prompting. Just take a peek. If you have tips and tricks, you've dealt with that in the past, just reply. Share with the community what you've dealt with, how it's impacted you. We'd love to hear from that. And other than that, just want to say thank you everyone for being here. We really appreciate it. And we will see you on the next virtual meetup. Have a great one.